Good day, my name is Louwrens Bakker and I'm a legal advisor at SEESA's Consumer Protection and POPI department.
Good day, I'm Damian Bothma. I'm also a legal advisor at SEESA's Consumer and POPI department. Today we'll be talking about the collection of personal information as well as the purpose therefore.
Now Damian, we're speaking about the purpose. The Act requires that it must be a specific purpose. Why does it have to be that specific purpose?
Yeah, so the Act makes provision for Section 13, which expressly stipulates that the collection of personal information should be for a purpose that is defined, specific, so it's explicitly defined, specific, as well as lawful. This is all known and referred to as purpose specification requirement, which is condition 3 of the Act.
Now, can you foresee any problems arising should a company not comply with this purpose specification requirement?
Yes, definitely. I think if a company collects personal information without determining the purpose thereof, it might lead to problems, or it might lead impossible to actually identify who the responsible party is. It might make it a little bit difficult in terms of complying with the notification requirement, where a company has to inform the person about the purpose for using that information, as well as it might lead to some problems when it comes to getting rid of information. So without knowing what the purpose is, the Act more or less refers to where the purpose is irrelevant or has been achieved, you should get rid of the information.
Now, here's the million-dollar question. How specific is specific?
Yeah, well, that's quite specific. But the key elements of POPI is transparency, meaning that it's not an acceptable norm anymore for people or for companies to use a person's information without their knowledge. Actually, you can think of it as the rule of thumb is, will that person be surprised by you using the information or the purpose for what you're using the information? And if it's yes, it might not be that specific enough.
Now, the second part you stated is that it has to be explicitly defined. Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, so explicit is defined as being clear, understandable, very simple. There should be no doubt in terms of how explicit it should be. This compliance requirement is also required. It's actually like a prerequisite for the requirement that all processing activities should be documented in terms of Section 17. In other words, the purpose should be documented and recorded. It shouldn't only be implicit.
And then we're also speaking about a lawful purpose. So the Act refers and requires you to have a lawful purpose. What does that entail?
Yeah, well, to put it differently, it's not sufficient anymore to only have a purpose. It also requires you now to justify your use of that information for the purpose.
Now, does the Act give us these justification grounds, as you've mentioned?
Yeah, the POPI Act expressly makes provision for these justifiable grounds in terms of Section 11. Obviously, the most common one, which everyone loves to use, is consent. They want to get consent throughout the whole board in order to use information, but consent is not the only requirement. It might be that information might be used for the performance or conclusion of a contract. That's also one of the justifiable grounds. It might be that information is used for a public law duty by a public body, or where there's a legal obligation imposed on the person using the information, or whether the person using the information is acting within the interest of a third party, or within the interest of the person whose information is being used.
Now, Damon, this is very complicated. As you've said, consent is so easy. Why not fall back and you just use consent?
Yeah, well, I think that will be the most preferable one. But the biggest and most common misconception of POPI is that people feel that they can use consent to justify all use of information. However, we do not advise that consent be used as the only and exclusive justifiable ground. There's a reason why the POPI Act makes provision for Section 11 and the justifiable grounds. We do, however, believe that a justifiable ground should be determined before the collection and the use of information. And that's why we would like to invite people to visit our website so that we can be of assistance for them in terms of POPI compliance.
Thank you very much, Damian.
Thanks, Louwrens.